In this video, you're going to see how to rig the Mulligan lure on a variety of different jig heads. This lure has been awesome. This is a 4-inch paddle tail. It has little indentions like a golf ball. It casts an absolute mile, skips great, awesome action. Most importantly, generates strikes from a variety of species: redfish, sea trout, snook, flounder, tarpon, bass, you name it. If it's a predator fish that eats a bait fish that's around 4 inches, it'll absolutely eat this lure. And so one great thing about this, it is very easy to rig on a lot of different options. And I'm going to show you these three. These are basically the core essentials if you're going to be using soft plastics. Number one, to be weedless. These two options enable you to be weedless and also cover a variety of different depths. So I'll show you this one. This is the shallow runner on a weighted hook. And this is a weedless football jig that you'll see for getting down deeper water with structure while being weedless. Both of which, again, very, very important. And if you're fishing more open water and you need to be deep, that's when this traditional jig head with the exposed hook is the ticket. Again, the great news is that this lure works very well with all options. All right, so we'll start with my personal favorite. This is what I use most often. This is the weighted hook. This is for using this lure in shallow water, shallow meaning under 3 feet of water, and we need to be weedless. For fishing seagrass, oysters, skipping our mangroves and our docks. This lure rigged on this weighted hook, which is the Haas Helix Hook 3/0, is absolutely awesome. All right, so step one is we need to get this point, this centering pin point, right in the middle of the lure. So get there dead center, and then just have it aligned, and then put a little bit of pressure. We're putting the coil towards the lure, and then start twisting. And what happens? It'll just twist right on. This is a strong material, but it also can enable some easy rigging like this. So once you get up to the lure gets up to the top of the spring, that's when you stop. And again, you make sure that the underbelly portion is facing towards the hook. So there you can see the underbelly is going towards the hook. And so what I like to do now is I like to just flip it over and then just rest the hook in the underbelly slot, right? Just rest it. And then we can see now where this hook is going to naturally go through this lure without going too far or without going too short. If you go too short, you're going to have a big turn in the lure. You do not want to have any turns in the lure. You want it perfectly straight. So lay it in the underbelly. I like to just put my thumb there right where the hook will naturally go, like right there, right where it'll naturally go through, and then just give a nice 90-degree angle, push the hook down, pop it right out, and it just comes through perfect every time. This is a nice, perfectly rigged lure. This thing will absolutely catch a bunch of fish. So this is pretty weedless. If you want to be extra weedless, what you want to do, instead of letting this hook, basically just rest on the surface, rest on the top of the lure, is you just simply just put a little bit of material over the hook point, push back, and now that hook point is just under the material so that when you can bounce off of docks or oysters or mangrove roots and not get snagged, but as soon as that fish strikes, it exposes the hook and fish on. And as I said before, this is my favorite way to rig it. I do a lot of fishing up in the shallows. In this combination, I have not seen anything that produces fish as consistently as this exact setup for fishing under 3 feet of water. All right, so now for the second option. This is my favorite for fishing deeper water. When I say deep, meaning more than 3 feet of water. And then depending on the exact depth, depends on the actual size weight that I use. But this is a swinging football jig. We call it the Haas Weedless Football. This thing is awesome. I now use this more than traditional jig heads because it basically allows me to fish these lures weedless. Here's a completed rig. Now I can get down there deep. I can bounce on rocks or bounce off of dock pilings without getting snagged. And same thing like the weedless, like the Helix hook like you saw before. As soon as the fish strikes, hook point gets exposed. Another benefit of this type of hook is that it actually lasts longer. I feel like I can catch more fish per lure when I'm using this setup versus a traditional jig head setup. So now let's show how to rig. As you'll see, it's nice and easy. And so what I like to do is I like the 3/0 size hook for this Mulligan, but it certainly can work with the 4/0. I just again personally like the 3/0 better. It's a little bit more weedless, and the hookup ratio is still good. To start, I like to have the jig head in the right hand with the hook point going over toward the left. And same thing as before, the Mulligan in my left hand with the underbelly slot facing towards the right. And the start is to have the hook point and go right through the middle of the lure, right in the top, straight dead middle, and just go straight down toward the middle of the lure, right middle on all axis, middle looking this way, as well as middle looking that way, and go down. The distance you want to go down is the same distance from the top of this swinging head to the bend of the hook shank. So we're talking about a 1/2 inch. And the reason for this is we want to actually lock that head into place, and we really want to have as much material in this area as we can. That's going to help us catch more fish per lure than if we go a 1/4 inch, say. So as we go through there, right, go pop it out, and then we're going to slide this lure over this hook. So what we need to do is we need to get around this big turn, and what I like to do is I just kind of like to pivot it as I go through, right? And you can see it'll naturally flow, but if you pivot, it'll just help make sure that it doesn't get torn. And again, once you get through, you'll notice that we've basically pinned the head. We pinned the head in position. That is a good thing. Again, we want this material here. We want as much material here as possible, because the more material here, the more fish we can catch per lure, and so that is a good thing. Also, if you're skipping up under docks, the fact that this head is pinned, it significantly helps skippability. You do not want that wobbly head when skipping lures. And I do know a lot of people like the wobbly head. They think it gives lure more action. I have not yet seen evidence of the wobble head getting more strikes than the fixed head. If anything, I've seen this type where the head is fixed get the most action. So we got the lure up. That's half the battle. Now we need to go take this lure through the belly of the lure. Just like the helix hook, the underbelly is automatically going towards the hook, and so we're going to lay the hook right in the underbelly, put with our thumb about the area where this hook needs to go through. Same thing as before, do a nice 90-degree turn, pop it on through, and now we have a perfectly rigged lure. This thing is ready to rock. This will catch an absolute ton of fish. And again, same as before, if we want to be extra weedless, we basically just push the material forward, dig the hook point in, and now we've skin hooked it. And so now we can get right down there in the rocks. We can bounce off of dock pilings, and knowing that we're not going to get snagged, but as soon as we feel that thump, that fish will push down on the lure, expose the hook, and game on. All right, so last but certainly not least is the traditional jig head. You've probably seen this before, but I'll still show it just in case. There is a trick to make sure that you get the most longevity of your lures, and I'll show that in this lesson. So as far as the jig head I like best, I like this football jig. This is actually designed for power prawns, but it works great for these lures as well. And my favorite hook size is either 3/0 or 4/0. It seems to do well for both. This is a 4/0. This is a little bit on the high end, but again, either 3/0 or 4/0 will work out just right. So how this works is we want to have the jig head in the right hand, the lure in the left. And so one difference than before is now we want the underbelly going the other way, because what we're going to do is we're going to have to thread this lure up on the jig head, and we want the underbelly on the bottom once it's complete. Also, we're going to go ahead and just kind of measure where we want that hook to come out. So we know that we want the hook to come out right about here, right about where the front part of the lure is touching the jig head. That's where we want that hook to naturally come out. So we've noted on the lure where that is, and now we're going to go ahead and thread it up. So again, have the underbelly away from the hook this time. Take the hook straight through the middle and just go nice and slow. I recommend, if you're new to this, just go nice and slow. Just make sure that you're going straight through the center of the lure based on this axis as well as this axis, right? The true center of the lure. We're going to go through until this head starts getting over to about that level. You can see that head starting to bend up. Now we're going to pop out the top and try to go straight out the top. And you know you have it right when, before you take this lure over these hook keepers, it's at about that angle right there. You want to see this type of curve before you put it over the keepers, because as you put it over the keepers, it's going to basically straighten it out. The goal here is to have a perfectly straight lure once we put the lure all the way up the top. So I mentioned before a little trick to make sure to get as much longevity as possible. These spikes are big. They're big for a reason. They hold the lure very well. However, they are big enough to actually tear the lure. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that we don't tear the lure at the same axis of where we're using it. So instead of right now just pushing it straight up and forcing it up over those keepers, we're going to first do a 90-degree turn. So we're going to twist the lure. Now we're going to be doing our little tears on the opposite axis that's not getting used. So we're just going to go right over those keepers while being turned sideways. And then once we're at the top, we're going to twist it back into place. This way, all that material, right, all the material that currently is holding it in place did not get torn at all. The only tears happen right here on the sides, and that doesn't matter when we're actually using it. And so the final check to make sure that it's rigged properly is when you look at the lure, it doesn't have any kinks. There's no hard turns. It's a nice straight lure, nice and aerodynamic. It's not going to be helicoptering in the water. That is the guaranteed way to not catch fish. When these things aren't rigged properly, they really don't do very well at all. But when they are rigged properly, they absolutely crush it, and it's really hard to beat a properly rigged soft plastic, especially one like this that has such great action in the water and casts a very long way. So that completes the lesson on how to rig the Mulligan lures on the variety of different jig head options. All of these are awesome. Again, it's all about matching the specific type to the type of area that you're fishing. The less weeds in structure, right? You might as well go with the open jig head because it has the best hookup percentage with that exposed hook. But if you're fishing around structure, which is actually typically where most of the feeding is, that's when you really need to have a weedless option. And just like traditional jig heads, these different options have different weights. So these Haas Helix hooks come in 1/8 all the way up to 3/16. And then these footballs go from 3/16 all the way down to 2 ounces. So there's a lot of different options there. Again, match the weight of the jig head or the weighted hook to the depth range that you need, and that's where the magic happens. And so if you need any help with knowing what size weight to use with these lures, I'll put a link down below to a cheat sheet. We made a cheat sheet that for every lure we sell, we have the proper size weight to use for specific depth ranges and the best option if you need to be weedless or non-weedless for each one. So a link to that is down below. If you have any questions at all about these, use the comment section down below. And if you need to get any of these items, make sure to pick them up. They're only available at fishstrong.com. And if you're an Insider Club member, you get 20% off of all of these items. So thank you so much for your time and watching. We hope to see you again soon.